Greedo. And then this is Hammerhead. See, this is Walrus Man. And then this is Snaggletooth. And this is Lando Calrissian. See? And this is Boba Fett.
It's great because we were allowed things like that. You know, we were allowed opportunities to kind of let it be told through children's eyes.
He'd go from thinking I was his new best friend to thinking I was his school teacher, because I would talk to Henry constantly. I talked to Henry so often while the camera was rolling, and while Henry was doing his dialogue, I would coach him while the camera was going, that when Henry first saw E.T. at the sneak preview, when I turned to him when the movie was over and said, "How did you like it?" he said, "It was okay, but you've got to cut your voice out. Your voice is all the way through the movie." As Henry saw the movie, he kept hearing my voice directing him. 5 fingers, 5 fingers, 1 finger, 1 finger, 5 fingers, faster and faster, guys. Surprise him. I dressed up as a teacher, but not as a man teacher. I dressed up with the veil and the wig and the lipstick, and I became a total kind of new me. You gotta take me serious. This is Halloween, folks. I don't dress this way all the time. I'm not trying to get out of the Army like Jimmy Farr. This is actually my date for tonight for the costume ball. Ah, Miranda, what sweet fingers you have.
What she will be? You say it yet?
What?
What is she will be? You say it or yet?
Oh, in the closet.
Yeah.
Halloween. Remember Halloween?
Halloween was great.
We had such a good time, and Steven dressed up as this old lady, and it was so brilliant.
He directed the whole day
Yes,
as an old lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
He would be, you know, behind the camera with his high heels, and he looked really great, too.
I'm enjoying this. I might never come out of this, as a matter of fact. There's a lot of advantages. Social advantages, another way.
Thank you very much.
For one thing, look at all those pretty colors you can wear. I didn't have children back in the early 80s, you know, and suddenly I was becoming a father. Every single day I felt like I was Drew's father, Henry's father, and Robert's father, and you know, it felt good. And I think I have a big family now because it felt pretty good having 3 kids back then. Isn't this fun, Drew? Learning how to play volleyball and tetherball and stuff like that? Yeah. Do they pay you for going to school? Your mom is going to kill me for saying things like that.
I hope not.
I hope not, too. As a kid, I let all the frogs out of the science class, the ones we were supposed to dissect. I let about 5 of them go, and actually never got caught. So, you know, what the heck, I put it in the movie. But the toughest thing Henry had to do that he didn't want to do is on the first day of shooting, he had to kiss the girl on the lips. In the school scene where he stands on top of his classmate to be tall enough to kiss the girl right smack on the lips. And he didn't want to do this, and he didn't want to be a movie actor. At that moment, I saw his entire career. He was giving it all up. Wait a minute. Wait. She swung off.
Cut!
What problem was it? Swung her too wide.
Okay, everybody back to your starting
Right side of the
places.
face. In other words, you see Henry, you kissed her this side, you want to kiss her this side. Your nose wants to be over here, not over there. Okay? John Wayne's nose was on that side of Reno O'Hara's face.
Okay.
Right? You ready for more? Tiger? All right, he's cooling off. He's cooling off. That's right.
That was the one part in the script that I remember sitting down reading it for the first time, going, okay, spaceship, cool. Alien, cool. Kissing a girl? No way, I have to do this.
Those problems and those issues were always there, and because we were dealing with real life, you know. We were dealing with an alien that all 3 young kids believe was real. Despite seeing the operators, the special effects technicians in the background, despite the kids catching out of their peripheral vision, a pull of the lever means a blink of the eye.
He's really real.
There was a lot of different elements, but for some reason, no matter what. It was always very real to me.
Yeah. It was amazing once everything was set to go and the cameras were rolling and you were in the scene, everything was incredibly real.
In the closet, fast.
I remember saying to Carlo that E.T. should kind of waddle when he walks like Chaplin with his cane, but he should also look like Bambi on ice, where Bambi couldn't find his footing. So when E.T. starts to walk on Earth, he is ungainly and he is insecure. I got a Yoda costume and didn't tell George Lucas I was doing this, and dressed someone up as Yoda. And I just had this idea, it'd be really fun, that as E.T. walks by with Elliot and Michael in their costumes, E.T. has a ghost with a sheet over him. Yoda's going in the other direction. Bikers.
I hadn't seen E.T. finished, and when we finally finished, it had a screen up here for ILM, and I went to the screening, and well, Steve had warned me that there was something special in it for me, and so we went through the thing, and then suddenly Yoda showed up in the film. Everybody in the audience cheered, of course, because it was an ILM screening, but I really loved it. I mean, I was amazed and flattered, and it was a very funny moment.
I just remember George was sitting right next to me, and when Yoda came on the screen, George gave me a little nudge with his arm. I guess it's his way of saying that was cool.
One of the nice shots that has become Amblin's sort of symbol is the view of the bicycle flying in front of the moon. And when that shot came up, it just seemed like, we should do this with a real moon. We should get as much realism into this as we can. And so Mike McAllister, trees, and I think it took about a week. In the afternoon he'd go out for 3 or 4 hours and find the right spot to be able to do it. And then I think we shot it for 2 nights. And got 2 or 3 versions of it. That was about all we got in that time. And it's all real.
Don't crash, please.
I drew more upon the Close Encounter experience of having no villains whatsoever in that story, vis-a-vis Alien Visitation, and thought, why have villains in this story? The villain really should be adults who do not have the same pure understanding that children have about a situation like this, and the adults who would be afraid and more frightened than children, who might scream and call the police, and the police who may further not understand, or the government that may further not understand and want to experiment and do scientific laboratory, vivisectioning on an extraterrestrial. That would be the threat. The threat would be science.
I remember that in the earlier scripts, E.T. and Elliot were always, when they fell ill, taken to a hospital. And then it was up to Michael and his friends to come and rescue them from the hospital. And I remember scouting hospital after hospital. We couldn't find a hospital we really liked that would be available to us on a scale that we needed.
Stephen came in from an international flight. And at the time at Los Angeles International Airport, they were building the Bradley terminal, and they had a temporary structure erected for international flights, and it was one of these big pneumatic structures. Well, he he had the idea, which was absolutely brilliant and psychologically so appropriate, to take the whole thing and bring it back to the home, which is this warm, comfortable environment that we've gotten used to where the kids are growing up turns into a nightmare.
And it made a lot of sense to me that the house would be the place that the government would seal up, shut down the neighborhood surrounding it, and do their work there.
Stay with me. Please stay together. I'll be right here. I'll be right here.
I had worked so much with very tangible to me, where I could just draw on the actual experience, what was going on in the scene, which is something that's very, very special, I think, when you can do that, because it makes it all the more real. You're not pulling something from a previous experience, you're drawing on the there and now.
Quiet!
It's still beef then.
Okay, let's go. Okay, let's go.
Oh, yeah. Mom!
I don't think tears have ever been that readily available to me in my entire life.
Okay, you don't want to identify with that?
Yeah. Wipe the doll's face too. Thank you. Thank you. Movies are so sad, especially this one.
The biggest actor of them all.
You know, I think it's going to be, it'll be sadder if it's happy sad. You know what I'm saying? And I think you'll feel sadder if it's more you're trying to cover that up. You're trying to cover the sadness with some happy talk to E.T. Like, remember when?
Yeah.
Remember 3 weeks ago? Remember when you first came into the house with me and I showed you Guido and Hammerhead and
Trying to hide it with a
Snaggletooth?
smile.
Trying to hide it with a smile a little bit, yeah.
He's an incredible sculptor of a story. You know, it's very, that was a very important moment in the film, you know, and I think that in his hands, he knew what to get out of us.
I looked at the sequence and they had a bunch of storyboards for the sequence, so each of us got a rough idea of what these things had to do, how we had to build the scale on the bikes, how we had to scale up the puppets. They were fairly large for animation puppets. I think the tallest one was probably 2 feet tall, which is quite big. Ordinarily you work on a scale of about, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches. It's just easier to work that way. Easier as an animator to work that way. But these were built large so that we could get the detail into the bikes, so that we could get the detail into the outfits that the kids had to wear, which were made out of actual clothing, so that all this would, like, you know, scale up appropriately.
I really think that a big part of the reason the movie hasn't aged very much and it feels somewhat timeless is because, in a sense, it was never designed to be an effects movie. And so, even though we had to create that creature with the technology that existed then, Steven shot E.T. as a character in a way that he really existed. He wasn't trying to call attention to the fact that, isn't this a great effect? He was really trying to achieve something that would feel as real as possible. And as I said, even with ILM, the contribution was, I remember a lot of the reviews even said, was seamless. And it's because we didn't want a sky with a sliver moon to say, oh, isn't that a great effect shot? We wanted it to look like we'd actually shot that perfect night moon. And I think also, Stephen made a very crucial decision in the design of the spaceship. And he said, I want this to look like Jules Verne. And again, that placed it in a kind of timeless context. He wasn't trying to come up with some sort of futuristic look at what outer space creatures may be flying around in. He took something that we already subconsciously identified with.
Well, Ralph McQuarrie contributed the entire design from scratch of the spaceship.
I explored various shapes that I thought would be interesting, that would be sort of in that category of the Dr. Seuss thing.
Ralph wanted to do a different spaceship, and he had this great concept on his own to do a bobble, just an oval, just a complete circle, with a very reflective mylar surface that would reflect the trees of the forest in Northern California and, you know, reflect the sky and the rainbow clouds. I mean, it was a wonderful concept, and he made this very kind of quixotic rendering where the ET spaceship looked a bit like ET. It was squat, it had legs, and had little kind of like feet that went out from under it. And it was just, I just fell in love with the design, didn't question it, and just said, that's it, let's build it.
The hardest scene for me was probably the goodbye scene.
You'll walk all the way from here, right over to ET, and you'll take your position in front of him. And the first thing he says is, he says, stay. He says, come. He puts his hands up and he says, come. And your mom and dad are waiting right over there off camera. And you just look over at your mom, and she is pleading with you not to go. She has tears in her eyes, she's sitting on her, she's actually fallen to her knees, and she's, just with her eyes, not with anything she says, just with her eyes, she's saying to you almost mentally, don't go, please stay with me, stay home. And that you just turn back to ET, and you don't have to say, no, I can't, don't have to verbalize it, just shake your head and make ET know that you can't go with him.
You want to try sticking it down?
And at that point, ET lowers his head. He lowers his head real sadly, and he touches his heart, and he says, ouch. And then you'll touch your heart, and you'll say ouch back to him. Because it hurts you as much as it's hurting him. This is a real heart-breaking moment for the two of you.
Easy, stay.
And then, after touching the heart, E.T. is going to put his hands on your shoulders, and he's going to bring you in for a hug. And you'll hug this side of E.T. You'll have his head on this side, and you'll just hug for a while. You'll just have you hugging for a while. And then you'll separate, and E.T. will point right to your forehead, right between your eyes. And he says, right here. He says, I'll be right here. And you'll reach out your hand, you just sort of touch his cheek. And he has a little tear in his eye, just pretend there's a tear, then you'll wipe a tear away from E.T.'s face. And we'll play it that way. Okay? Real softly and gently and no rush. I think it was good to shoot the movie in continuity because you can't say to a youngster, we're shooting the last scene first and the first scene last. You can't say that to a kid. It doesn't make sense to them. And I wanted them to be so caught up as themselves and as their characters by the time they say goodbye to E.T. that whatever emotion happened there would happen on take one and would be genuine emotion. And every single shot you see of Elliot crying and hugging E.T. and saying, I'll be right here and doing this, that's all take one.
There was a scene shot where Elliot and the boys are playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons again. First of all, Elliot's now the ringmaster rather than the little brother trying to get in. He has all this confidence. He's grown. He's the master of his own destiny now.
We come in peace. We have been on this journey for many days. We are adventurers, searching for experience. And if we don't got any, we aren't going to be able to survive in this world.
The camera goes out the window and rises, and you see that on the roof is the communicator.
Okay, we have two shields now. No. All right, let's split up.
No,
Try
I
to
get one
start
shield,
a
I
new
get
game.
one shield. Isn't it getting too late?
No, come on.
Sure. Okay, my monk paladin's going on.
Yeah, paladin monk. Right, wrong, forget
Sure.
it.
What's wrong with the paladin monk?
Go
It's in the
home,
rules.
Mikey, we don't like it.
This is my home.
I'm sorry. Get out then.
What does he
It's
have
night.
now? Plate
It's gonna
mail,
go
huh?
out. No,
You can only assume that one day they'll be in touch again. It's a nice ending. It would be just as good as the other ending. But what happened, I believe, is that when the other ending was shot and looked at, it was so emotional. Henry was so emotional that it was hard to go anywhere else. And it didn't really matter whether you felt like they were going to see each other again. That wasn't the point anymore.
Very early on, we, in trying to get the film down to size, we made several fairly large lifts. And because you never know if those pieces of film are going to go back in, they were lifted out in their entirety. I remember one of the first big lifts that we took was the school material, where Elliot's acting up at school. He's taken to the principal's office. The principal was played by Harrison Ford.
I don't know,
You say you don't know why you did these things.
but I'm sorry. I'll never do them again.
I see you fine young people from good homes, every advantage, your whole life laid out in front of you. And I see the pot, the pills, the angel wings. Sure, it's a cruel world out there. Deceit, treachery.
It was a very big deal for me because I had done a couple of things before, but I'd always, the reason I got involved in film in the first place was because I had seen Star Wars, and that was fantastic to me. And this came along, and there was an alien, and I was, wow, this is great. And Harrison Ford, my God, who could ask for anything more?
I'm there.
I'm there.
So we have Harrison Ford playing the principal, very strict, sitting back, you know, in a tweed suit. And I didn't show his face that clearly. I just showed the back of his head and his hand tapping and his leg, because I wasn't showing adults in the movie. So he was still a, that's why I think he did it. He said he'd do it because he didn't have to really be on camera. And so as he's lecturing Elliot, but his back is turned, so he's not looking at Elliot. Elliot's sitting in a chair across from the principal. E.T., meanwhile, is at home trying to take all these communicator parts and telepathically, somewhat, through telekinesis, move them up the stairs. So as E.T. is successful in moving all this junk heap up the stairs to the bedroom, Elliot starts rising.
I wouldn't lie to you, son. See, you're in a way your own best friend, or your own worst enemy. I think the best thing to do is to go home for the rest of the day and think about what's happened here today and tomorrow. Well, tomorrow, like they say, tomorrow's the first day of the rest of your life. Am I right?
May we go now?
Yes, both of you dismissed. Dismissed.
I have this little part in the movie where I'm a nurse, and it's a scene that, thank goodness, and lucky for all of us, is no longer in the movie. But Elliot is acting so berserko in class that they send him down to the school nurse. So they put me in this nurse's outfit with a little hat, and I remember that there was a big discussion of whether my hair should be really flat or be sticking out. So they chose sticking out, and luckily I was a silhouette. Which, even still, it's good I'm gone, but I was only a silhouette. I didn't have to talk. But I did have to grab Elliot by the arm, and I think at one point Henry complained that I was grabbing him too hard. But luckily, it's no longer in there.
Action. I think all movies, every scene needs to advance the story. And anytime a scene doesn't advance the story, but it's just fun for the sake of fun, it doesn't really belong in the movie, but belongs in kind of a neat, nifty archive, or maybe at the back of a laser disc. I regret two things in the movie. I regret that a gun was used as a threat to stop children on bicycles. And that last cut, before E.T. opens his eyes and the bikes take off, of the gun coming up, not pointing at the kids, but just coming up in a brandishing, kind of at-ready position. I regret that cut, and I regret the cut of the cops with guns in their hand, running out to the abandoned, Econoline van with the dry ice pouring out of the back, and E.T. is gone and he's not in there. I really regret having any guns in the movie. And if I ever reissue the picture, delete the shot of the cop holding the gun up, which in the current film causes E.T. to fly. I think those were two, distasteful moments for me.
E.T. phone home.
When I did the picture, I had to give off-camera dialogue, and rather than just have the script person read the dialogue out loud in a normal tone of voice, I began to say things like,
E.T. phone home.
Or I would say things like,
Elliot. Elliot. Or I'll be right here.
And it was that sort of thing, and it was fun to do, and I did that, and that became the temp track, the beautiful voice. And one day, when I was shooting the Halloween scene, just before dusk, we began turning the cameras. Deborah came over to visit, and I said, can you come over and do every single E.T. line in the script for me to a tape recorder? And I brought the sort of tape recorder, or Nagra, it was a full Nagra, into my trailer in the suburbs, and I turned it on, and Deborah took the script and did every single voice. So anybody and everybody who saw the rough cut of E.T. heard a couple lines of mine, actually still in the movie, but most of all, they heard Deborah Winger's voice and never knew it was Deborah doing all the voice inside the rough cut. And then Ben Burt found Pat Welsh.
She was not an actress, and although she had always wanted to be an actress, and in fact had briefly pursued ambitions in those directions sometime back in the 1930s or 40s. I explained to her what I was trying to do, that I was searching for an interesting quality voice for an alien character, and would she be interested in auditioning. And she was a very good sport, and I took her right down the street there. We were only a block away from our studio, and took her inside and had her do some readings of some of the lines that E.T. would say, like phone home.
E.T. phone home. My God, he's talking. Oh.
E.T. phone home.
E.T. phone home.
And so I took her voice and I changed it just a little bit electronically. I changed the pitch and lowered it just a little bit. And I had her speak in a rather monotone quality and slowly. And what I would do to give it an element of the alien character was I would mix her voice with the breathing or the inhale and exhale of one of the animal sounds that I had recorded, something that was sort of non-human. And to the human ear, you can detect the human quality as well as the, say, animal quality, the non-human quality. And it was that blend that I began to work with to create, to envelope the words that she would speak in English.
Stay.
I should mention that all told, there were 18 different contributors to the voice of E.T., including the animals, as well as the various human characters. Certainly Pat Welsh's was the most significant single contribution because she did the English words. But remember, those words were enveloped and intercut with all kinds of other little noises. There's scenes when E.T. gets drunk, and I used some vocalizations from my old cinema professor at USC, Ken Mura. I guess he plays a good drunk alien, I don't know. There were some other children and friends of mine that I recorded breathing and making funny noises. I really just collected a lot of different pieces of things to put it all together.
Well, let's go on and go back, shall we?
And music's out. Music's out.
Okay.
We are OUT at that point.
Okay. Well, let's go back and cue this little thing.
Right. And I've always felt that Johnny was my musical rewrite artist. He'd come in, see my movie, and rewrite the whole damn thing musically and make it much better than I did. And he can take a moment and just uplift it, and he can take a tear that's just forming in your eye, and he can cause it to drip.
The first time, so the composer doesn't have the benefit of all the beautiful visuals and the dissolves and all the rest of it that's put in later. What do we have to do musically to accompany a thing like that? I look for melody, all these intervals that reach up, up, up all the time, you know, to stretch the musical grammar, to give this kind of feeling. And then in performance, the same thing. I don't know what that's more like ballet, that's more like a certain kind of energy of how you've got a 100-piece symphony orchestra, how do you make it feel like it's going to come right off the floor and not be all these heavy people playing violins, but with lift. And so that's a kind of immediate balletic or even athletic goal of the music in a scene like that. And when you get that feeling, you fill your heart with it because it's like a deep breath of wonderful air and you feel free. And it's affirmed that you have a creature that you can fly with that is not of our own species, but of our own spiritual oneness that we'd come together and join, and we go over the moon. Fantastic idea, and it needs great sweep in the music and great feeling of freedom. Freedom being, in this case, the loss of gravity. We speed up beyond escape velocity, we lose gravity, and we're now in space, and we are finally free. And that's what the orchestra has to give us, the composer has to give us.
In 1975, he directed Jaws. In 1978, he directed Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1981, he directed Raiders of the Lost Ark. And now, Steven Spielberg brings us E.T., the Extraterrestrial.
The sneak preview of E.T. was a religious experience. It was emotional, it was loving, it was generous on the audience's part, and it was a love fest. It really was. And you know, you never know what you got until you show it to an audience for the first time. And I didn't pretend that E.T. was anything other than a kids movie about kids, for kids, of kids, by kids, even by I was
funny going, they're laughing, they like it. And it was overwhelming. I see all these kids it was the kids primarily, to see the reaction they were having. And then at the end of the movie, everybody at a preview audience, they're all standing up and clapping and stuff. You just don't ever see that.
Everybody paid complete attention, and there was a real feeling of identification. You could just slice the atmosphere. And it was just a wonderful, tender film festival. It was almost a phenomenon, you know. We took the film out of competition to Cannes on the last night.
And about 15 minutes before the end of the movie, people started to clap and stomp their feet. And we thought, what is this? You know, because first of all, your stomach's churning and you're nervous and you think, oh my God, they don't like the movie. And then we realized it was just the opposite. They loved the movie.
I'd never been to the Cannes Film Festival before. You know, what a way to go for the first time. I got this little telegram from Francois Truffaut, and the telegram, which meant so much to me, said, "You belong here more than me," echoing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, that just broke me up. And then at the end of the festival, we had like a 15-minute standing ovation, and I remember I kept getting standing up and sitting down. They kept clapping and standing up, sitting down. And I was getting embarrassed, and I turned to Melissa and made her get up and sit down. She got tired. Then everybody around me, I kept, take a bow. We were all getting, it was an amazing experience. And then there was this little flame in the middle of the crowd, and somebody was holding up a little lighter. I looked down at one person who wasn't clapping, just holding up a little, you know, cigarette lighter, and the flame was standing out, and it was Jerry Lewis, just holding up this lighter, which was a wonderful thing to see Jerry smiling, and it was you know, that will never be equaled.
I think we had a couple of genuine conversations about sequels. As I recalled, we were going to create another character called Joe, who was going to be a long, spindly guy. He was sort of going to be like the Fred Astaire to E.T.'s Gene Kelly. And we had fun sort of playing around with the idea. But at one point, I actually remember us sort of shaking hands on the fact that there would never be a sequel.
On many levels, this is a story that was very, very personal to Stephen. And I think he always felt, and I think he was right to feel this way, that it would cheapen the movie and the experience of the movie and what it meant to him and what it meant to audiences to just go try and duplicate the movie in some way. And on so many different levels, it was an experience for him and for all of us that we weren't going to duplicate.
I never made a sequel to E.T. because I can't ever make an E.T. movie as good as what I did. I mean, I would only shame the memory. I would only show people the flaws. E.T. isn't a mechanical cottage industry that invites further adventures of E.T. and other kids on the planet Earth. It is a one-time event. And to do 2 or 3 or 4 movies based on that one character is creating a franchise that I didn't, frankly, think was the honest and right thing to do. I could only further denigrate the memory of the first one by doing a second one. So I've just held out all these years, and I don't ever plan to make a sequel to E.T.
You think they're going to like the movie?
I hope so.
Look at them all out there. There's a lot of people here.
Yeah. Last time, remember how far, I think it was around the block. I think it was, wasn't it? It was.
We were really meal without somebody coming up to you, and trying to embrace life on that level, I think was hard, being as young as we were. But I know that, you know, we did it really well, which is really cool.
I don't know how much it changed me because I've never lived without having done it for me, and it opened a lot of doors for me and did a lot of good.
I think that it afforded...
It opened me up to more personal stories. Color Purple followed soon after that. Then came Empire of the Sun, and finally Schindler's List. It was, in a way, a ladder on a course of a kind of personal movie about human characters and human exploits and the human condition, as opposed to the other movies, which are much more, you know, adventures and films like Jaws. And and the Raiders films and Jurassic Park. So my career's sort of gone, you know, on two different roads that parallel one another. There's this kind of film, there's that kind of film. And I think E.T. gave me the courage to start creating that kind of film. And, oh, it's lovely. Cut. Beautiful. Beautiful. Like that.